wonderful word. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hey guys. How you doing? Full disclosure, I woke up like 15 minutes ago. I slept for maybe like 16 hours, like straight up. I was like asleep for forever. Feel like I finally got a day where I was just like allowed to sleep. I wasn't sick. I didn't have a headache. And I just was like, nah, dude, I really, really need it. I really, really need it. Schizo Poster writes, for the past 2 live streams, I've been trying to send money to your channel, but NATO, YouTube, blocking my donations for some reason. Just do it through the Patreon, dude. I got a Patreon link in the description. Do it through Patreon. That gets you into the Discord. You can sidestep the whole operation, right? Don't give me money through YouTube, right? Give me money through the Patreon. And that's the best way to support me, honestly. If you'd like to support the stream, support what I'm doing, support anyone attempting at all to actually push back against this ridiculous system that we live under. Just this absolute ridiculous system that we live under. Please consider donating to the Patreon. Kevin, good to see you, bud. Patreon does take a percentage of it, but YouTube takes a larger percentage. And also, I'm partial to the Patreon because it allows you to set up a monthly donation, which, you know, I want to get my hooks into you. I want you to be part of the whole thing for forever. So please do consider donating to the Patreon. I appreciate it, guys. Midnight Rose, good to see you. Yeah, hello, my NATO-loving brethrens. Don't forget to grind and hustle. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, Cotton. Like, there just is a point where you have to kind of be like, okay, I guess we're in the end times. Like, I guess this is it. Like, we're deciding to do it, you know? And at this point, you really really gotta think that it's a decision, you know? Like, it's not just happening to us, you know? Like, we are choosing to do it. And I feel like part of like, doing this stream has helped me personally get to the point where I'm just okay with it, you know? I'm just sitting here being like, okay, you know, this is what we're doing. You guys know me, right? I take the more, like, hard spiritualist line of, like, we are just temporarily here, right? This is all just a temporary situation. There's no permanence to any of this. That we're all gonna move on, right? At one point or another. And there's no point having a sense of attachment. That the sense of attachment in Buddhist terms is one of the things that gives us a lot of our suffering. But we're not actually attached to this world. We are here just very, very, very temporarily in the first place. And any sense that we should be building something or creating something that persists beyond ourselves, I think for Westerners, we just need to acknowledge that that's not going to happen. We're not going to persist. Nothing will persist beyond ourselves. That any hope of building any kind of institutional power or institutional strength in order to benefit the next generation is just not going to happen. Like, I'm seeing articles coming out of the NDP where they're like celebrating and taking credit for, like, yeah, we got you guys a grocery rebate for $200. You guys are getting a $200 grocery rebate. And I'm just like, you guys are pathetic. Like, you guys are pathetic losers. Like, you're trying to whip up support and have people go rah-rah for $200? Are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? For a lot of people, that's like a day's wages, basically. You're just basically giving people holiday pay and then trying to be like, yeah, so vote NDP. Like, you guys should be talking about nationalization at this point. The idea that the NDP are not sitting there talking constantly, openly about things like a basic income, about things like nationalization, right, tells you that they're just a weak, insipid liberal organization that's not actually interested in confronting the demons that exist in our society. And so the decline of this society will be rapid. It's going to happen a lot faster than I think people think. And because you can't maintain a system this way, right? Like everybody's just sort of holding their breath, waiting for the boomers to die so that there can be some kind of inheritance, right? Like it's demented. We live in this sort of demented world, and for us as individuals, for us as people who are sort of aware of it and in a state of despair about it, my advice is to detach from the outcome. That it's important for us to continue putting pressure and continue putting our energy where it may be, but to acknowledge that there are huge, like, international multi-billion-dollar organizations that support Nazism, that support the decline of Western civilization, that genuinely believe that the way forward is through mass destruction. And we can only fight so hard, and we can only put our energy so hard that there will be negative outcomes. In the climate change conversation, for example. Well, thank you, Schizo Poster. I appreciate that. Good to see you grinning. Doing Lenin's work. That's right. Like, the climate change conversation has now become very clear and obvious that everyone expects there to be negative outcomes now. No one is sitting here being like, even if we started to do the work that was required in order to avoid total annihilation, if we began that process now, we would still encounter the negative outcomes. So we're talking about, like, places like New York, right? Like, I think New York is actually the biggest one, where the water levels are going to come up. And a place like New York, like, their entire subway system, right? Their entire subway system is going to experience flooding and is going to experience being underwater. Like, it's going to shut the entire city down. And because we're ruled by these just detached, psychopathic narcissists, they're just not going to care. They're just going to find a way to maximize their profits from the disaster. Yeah, well, China's not the only country, but certainly China's the largest. Like, they're the ones that are acknowledging what's coming and are actually trying to do something about it. But the issue, of course, is that because they're not alone in the world, right? That they have had to become quite isolationist in their thinking with it. Like, they've got to look out for themselves, because God knows that the largest polluters in the world are not doing anything, right? And are in fact doing everything they can to make the problem worse. Yep. Blue Waters economy forever. Oh, I mean, other countries are, like, smaller, right? Like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, like the other Asian countries. And you will find, if you go into places like Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, or Uzbekistan, right? And some of the African nations, right? Like, you'll find that they are trying to do stuff, but they're limited, right? They can't mass produce solar panels, right? Like Saudi Arabia, for example, they're filling their deserts with solar panels. So they're transitioning, and I think Saudi Arabia isn't doing it because they're like, we need to look for the climate solution. I think Saudi Arabia is just aware that everybody runs out of oil, and so Saudi Arabia, being the Machiavellian evil geniuses that they are making the transition to a new green economy, because they see very clearly and presciently that that's where it's got to go. Like, and I think it's not based in we've got to save the planet from climate destruction. I think it's based in we run out of oil, and our whole market, our whole thing is oil. And so where's our next, like, how are we going to stay connected to the world power system? How are we going to be a player in the world power system? Well, solar panels. We've got a lot of deserts, and let's just load them with solar panels, and that's what they're doing. But it plays into the climate conversation. So there are lots of countries that are actually doing stuff, but the issue is like we know who the primary polluter is, right? Like we know who the major polluter is, and it's America. The American military is the number one polluter on the planet. American agriculture, American industry has been just polluting and polluting and polluting like mad for decades and decades and decades. China has become the number one polluter because they're the ones that are producing all of the stuff and all the solar panels and all of the things to try to pivot away from it. But the West is intellectually constipated, right? Like the whole conversation surrounding electric vehicles, for example. Like electric vehicles are a pathetic attempt to like a ploy, right? The entire concept of car culture in the first place is the stupidest idea that we could possibly have. But we're so arrogant in our thinking. We're so narrow-minded and small in the way that we think about our society that all we know is me get in bumper car and go, and that's basically it. We're not a very intelligent or clever people, right? Like we're very proud of how dumb we are. Yeah, BlackRock. Yeah, the whole BlackRock situation, right? Like we literally have like BlackRock, Vanguard, and South Street have become just the owners of the society, and they're steadily moving in order to digitize the currency, steadily moving to digitize the society. They want to actually be able to sidestep the entire financial system so that they themselves can become the financiers. And it's just become pretty obvious that we are being ruled by like a technocracy, by a group of people who simply don't care. Like they simply don't care. That's the wildest thing. And if they do care, it's only to the degree that they can profit from it. Yeah, isn't it something like 100 companies that represent over 70% of global pollution? Yeah, that's right. That's right. But you need to recycle harder, Midnight Rose. It's all about the individual, don't you know? Right? Don't you know? Right? It's all about the individual. No, I mean, like, I am to a point now. Anytime I get into any conversation with liberals about, we should tax these people away, like, because taxation is the only thing that it's the limit of their imagination. They're not willing to go any further. I'm to the point now where it's like, no, it's time to nationalize these places. Because if you tax them, then they'll just defer the tax to somewhere else. They'll just do something somewhere else, right? Nationalization is the only word that I respect anymore. Taxation is like, what a joke. Like, what a joke. They own the tax system, right? They're not going to do it. The people that are screaming about how 15-minute walkable cities are communist dystopias because communism achieves totalitarian control by controlling movement are incredibly funny to watch, though. I mean, those people are interesting because I think they reveal, like, the society is collapsing into, like, a paranoid hysteria. And for reasons. Like, it's not as though they're screaming in a vacuum, right? It's not as though they have like a mental illness. That they have every reason to be skeptical of their government. They have every reason to be skeptical of what of the intentions of their society. They have every reason to do that. We are essentially ruled by neoliberal fascists, and the idea that neoliberal fascists want to put us in little boxes and you know, it's not a hard leap to see where that goes. And I think it's not unreasonable for people to think this way. And it really shows you, though, and I've said this all along, you could see this all throughout the COVID period, how there is a genuine mistrust and a general mistrust that exists within the society. We don't trust each other anymore, right? Nobody trusts anybody anymore. There's no systems of trust building. There's no systems of unity. There's no unifying projects. There's no building happening. There's nothing actually going on. And like, you can see that in the housing conversation, for example. I've said this before, that what is actually happening is that the corporate power structure is hoarding all the houses, right? Buying up all the properties and treating them like they're a commodity. That's what's actually happening. But what they're willing to concede and what they're willing to say is happening is, oh, well, we didn't build enough houses, right? That we fell behind on housing production and development is what they're saying. So they're willing to concede that capitalism fails through being incapable of keeping up with producing enough housing, right? So they're willing to admit that capitalism is an utter failure, doesn't actually produce enough, doesn't actually create enough housing. And they're willing to make that a concession and that admission that capitalism is an utter failure across the board, so that it won't reveal that capitalism is actually a massive failure because we have produced enough, but they're just hoarding it, right? So we're at this point now where even the owners of the system and the people who work within capitalism are essentially choosing in which way capitalism is a total and utter complete failure. And you can see that over and over and over again, that every conversation is essentially the ruling class and the defenders of capitalism admitting that capitalism is a complete and total catastrophe that doesn't fail at all. And they've become so demented and so deluded in their thinking that they're all essentially shrugging and saying, well, this is just human nature. Capitalism is just human nature. What are you going to do about it? Which is the biggest self-report of all, of course, because they're all just admitting that they're demented, deluded psychopaths, and that's just human nature, so what are you going to do, right? Midnight says, like, I saw a Facebook post about how some UPS place had turned the mailboxes so you couldn't use the drive-thru and had to get out and walk to the box, and someone was screaming about communism. Yeah, because of this little UPS station turning their mailboxes. Yeah. Like, this is the kind of, like, demented, like, we're not, I was saying this last night, and I think it's actually becoming, like, one of my major mantras now. Like, we are not operating from a place of reason. That we have given up on that. That's over. That there are people and there are voices in the society that are interested in having reasonable and rational conversations. Those people exist to a degree, but people are not making decisions and are not operating in the society based on rational thinking or reason or facts or any of that. It doesn't matter at all. And the people who are most susceptible to being the most emotional are, of course, the people who think that, or say at least, that they're the most reasonable. Like, the people who are walking around saying facts don't care about your feelings are the most hyper-emotional, snowflakey people in the society. And it's not close. Like, it's not close at all. And because we are operating from this place of hyper emotion while deluding ourselves into believing we're interested in reason. Like, one of the things that I really advise people actually do to really see this phenomenon is go seek out Jordan Peterson fans. Like, not Jordan Peterson himself, but Jordan Peterson fans. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a bunch of hyper-emotional, demented people cosplaying as intellectuals. That they're all just sort of pretending to be like Jordan Peterson, but they're all, like, hyper emotional, like, and Peterson himself's hyper emotional, right? Starts crying at any moment, all this sort of stuff, which I don't I'm not trying to downplay, Like, we all have emotions, right? This is an emotional thing that we're experiencing. We're all connected to our emotional selves, but we are pretending like we're not. That's the worst part of it, I think. Yeah, subscribe may be really nailing it. Don't trust the government. Believes everything they say about communism. Yeah, exactly. Like, I literally have a guy that follows me around on my socials now that all he'll say is communism is the same as Nazism. That's all he'll say. So he's just like a repeating NPC, right? And if you try to engage with him on facts, it's just communism is the same as Nazism. That's it. That's all he's capable of. And that you're not doing that because you're intelligent. You're not doing that because you're living in a place of reason or rational thinking. You're doing that because of an emotional response exclusively. And the issue, of course, is that because we're in such a hyper emotional space, we're going to do very stupid things. Like the election of Polyev that's going to happen is extremely emotional and extremely stupid. The people who actually believe that the election of the conservatives into the federal government is going to somehow improve the quality of life for the average Canadian are the most demented and deluded people in the society, and they're steadily turning into the majority, right? And it's happening not because people have looked at the issues and thought things through and really thought to themselves, okay, you know, we've got to do something, and I think this is a good alternative and all that kind of stuff. It's just literally fuck Trudeau. Right, which is as knee-jerk and as emotional a thing that a person can say, right? And we are going to start experiencing a rapid and massive decline as the extraction continues under a conservative government, like a ruthless, unfeeling, unflinching conservative government, and the backlash from that is itself also going to be extremely emotional, right? There's going to be huge sections of people who vote conservative who and it happens every time, right? This process that I'm describing happens a lot in Canadian politics. This is normal Canadian politics, right? That the Liberals get into power saying high-minded ideas and all this, which they're full of shit always. They're complete liars. You can see that with Justin Trudeau, right? One of the most prominent liars in Canadian history. Like, we're going to do electoral reform, immediately abandons it the second he realizes it's not going to go his way, and like full abandonment and a complete and total betrayal of the electorate. And so you have a backlash from that, right? But the backlash sees that the conservatives are no better. And so you end up with a period of like liberal decline, right? You think about the period of liberal decline that happened after the Chrétien government, for example, where it isn't like a bounce back. It's like a steady bloodletting of just like losing support until finally people are willing to just shrug. And it isn't that people rally behind the conservatives. It's that people don't bother showing up to vote for the Liberals anymore. And so the conservatives get into power. And you have a whole group, and then the process begins anew, where you have a whole group of people who are like, yeah, the conservatives will get in and they'll clean up this mess. And then things get much worse because conservatives are rapacious psychos, like to an individual, to like an individual voter. And the bounce back, though, is getting more hysterical, right? The bounce back is getting more hysterical because people are beginning to realize that they're trapped, that they've got nowhere to go, they've got no one to turn to, they've got nothing to look at, right? They've got nothing to look at, and it's going to turn into situations like you're seeing in France, right? Like the situation that's unfolding in France is getting to be world-shaping, right? It's no longer a rebellion. It's no longer just like a bunch of peasants with their pitchforks. Like we're looking at a situation now where it's possible for that the peasants are going to actually seize power and are actually going to overthrow the rulers in France. they've got enough support and they've got enough power in terms of their bodies that they're going to threaten to do that, which is why the police forces are becoming openly fascistic in France. And what's happening there is going to spread elsewhere. It's going to spread elsewhere. Things are going to become, and it's based in like the most basic stuff, right? Like parents are not going to watch their children starve for very long, right? Parents are not going to kids are not going to be willing to just exist in a society that refuses to provide for its citizens for very long. Like the general abandonment of the people in this fascist society that we live in is not going to be tolerated for very long. And so what's happening in France will spread, and the elite know this. And what's wild to me about this whole conversation, what's wild to me about this entire conversation is that it's strictly emotional. That there are obvious solutions, right? That if the ruling class was even rational, if the ruling class had sense, right? And there are voices within the ruling class that have sense, right? There are people within the ruling class that are saying we have to do something about this, right? But it's not going to result in anything because the people who actually have power are hysterical, psychopathic narcissists who are making their decisions based on money go up. That's it. Number go up. And that's it. They don't care about anything beyond that. And it literally doesn't matter if it completely destroys the entirety of the society, that they're just going to do this because number go up, make heart feel good. That's it. Number go up. Oh wow, number went up. I make good feel. And because of the hyper emotionality, because of the incapability of the ruling class to understand that, like, oh, like we could, like, what are simple solutions, right? Like really simple solutions. Just take some air out of everything, right? Well, you could cap rent. That'd be easy. Or you could do that today. It would take a lot of air out of the conversation, take a lot of air, a lot of tension. You could you could literally just make university education free, right? That would take a lot of air out of the conversation. You could shore up your healthcare system, take a lot of air out of the conversation, right? Like there's and these are just like the most banal ideas that exist. That there's so many other things that you could actually do. Like, and then you end up with ideas like a basic income. You end up with like there's so many ideas that are out there that you could actually implement. But you have to begin with, oh, there's a problem. We should try to fix it. And they're not interested in fixing it. They're interested in profiting. That's what they're interested in. And so this hyper worship and this hyper emotional state that we find ourselves in is leading us down the path of civil war. And at this stage in the game, it's becoming very clear that the ruling class doesn't want to avoid it. That they understand that what they're doing is leading the society down the path to civil war. They don't acknowledge that it's their fault, of course, because they're psychopaths and gaslighters. But but it is completely 100% their fault. That they are the ones that have the power, and they are the ones that could alleviate the suffering and the tension that exists within the society. And how do we know that they are aware that there is a conflict coming? Because the only thing they're willing to fund is police. Like, it's very obvious now. And what we're facing now is a brainwashed, indoctrinated society that refuses or is incapable of actually seeing what is patently obvious and patently clear for everyone else. That it takes a great deal of indoctrination. It takes a great deal of brainwashing. It takes a great deal of reduced thinking, intentionally done, to get a person to not see what is obviously the truth. Like, if someone was in the room staring at you, salivating at the mouth, sharpening knives, you would think that person's going to try to kill me. But if you have a heavy amount of indoctrination and you've come to believe that that person is on your side, right? If you believe that that person is your ally, because you went through a system of indoctrination to be convinced that that person is your ally, then anybody who says that person's trying to kill you or trying to kill us, you can just sort of hand wave away and just be like, no, of course not, and here's the justification for why it's important that that guy stands there looking at us, salivating at the mouth, sharpening knives. And we are experiencing like an enormous mass societal trauma, and that trauma begins as children. That when we are at our weakest and our most vulnerable, we are put into a system of indoctrination that indoctrinates us into the idea that our society exists and operates for the benefit of the people, which is the primary purpose of the education system, is to convince people against all evidence, against all facts, against everything that exists in the society, that our ruling class is actually in any way interested in benefiting the society. When what is extremely clear and obvious to anyone with a brain to see is that the ruling class exists to extract wealth from us, that we are cattle to them. They almost openly admit it. I mean, for God's sakes, we all remember Harper's old stock comment, right? We are cattle to the ruling class. That is how they view us, as cattle. And once you acknowledge that, and I understand why people don't acknowledge it, because it's horrifying, right? It comes with a great deal of emotional stress to admit that we are cattle in a system owned by a ruling class that is exclusively interested in harvesting us. And, well, yeah, we're bred for docility, without a doubt. And that docility, it takes, like, I mean, there's a reason why we're in school for 12 years. There's a reason why the education system lasts for 12 years. Like, I think it's easy to argue that education is good for the fact that people learn how to read and write, right? These extremely helpful systems. Do math, for example, right? These are extremely helpful, but it doesn't require 12 years of education to learn how to do that, right? It doesn't require 12 years of education to do it. It requires the reason why you're in school for 12 years is to get you to a point where you just bow your head and go along with what's going on, right? You're just swept away. Like there's this persistent Petersonian idea that the people who ascend to the top of the hierarchy, right, have done so because they are competent. But they're not competent. They're compliant. Because what the education system is vetting out is disobedience. That's all it's vetting out. That you don't need to be competent. You just need to do what you're told. You just need to be compliant. And as soon as you're compliant, right, that's the competence that they're looking for. They're looking for the people who are the most competent at being compliant. And if all you're willing to do is say, yes, sir, then you can be a CEO of a major corporation, right? That's how it works. Anyway, let's see what you guys are talking about. Imagine 14-minute cities. And Saudi Neom is supposed to be a 5-minute city. Clearly they are communists. We'll see about Neom. I'm actually interested in how Neom is going to work out. I suspect it'll be a dystopian hellscape, right? Like the whole project exists just to facilitate the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Like they don't give a shit about their people. Like they don't care at all. Like the whole thing is going to be pretty grotesque, I think, in the end. While mildly raising actual communist policies from actual communist countries like Vietnam or Cuba. Yeah, go seek out all Jordan Peterson fans. They are very rabid people. Well, I think the thing that's funniest about the Jordan Peterson fans is the tone that they take, right? They take on this like very high-minded kind of, oh well, when we facilitate the, and they like use big words that they don't know the definitions of in order to try to convince you that they're very smart when they're actually very dumb, right? Like the entire concept of like individualism as a concept, I think is very important, but this hyper individualism, sacrificing the collective for the sake of the individual is the dumbest thing I think that can be imagined, right? Just comes from a place of utter narcissism. Nazism is a compilation of genocidal racist ideologies from Baltics, East Prussia, and the Ukraine, eastern part of Poland. These places basically create Nazism. Yeah, I mean, and we know from what happened last night that TikTok is pro-Nazi, right? The Canadian government is pro-Nazi. We fund Nazis across the world. And if you actually point that out, if you actually cite articles and reporting about how we are funding Nazis all across the internet, you get banned for it. So we're a very pro-Nazi society, and we're not doing anything about it, really. Like and when we fund Nazis abroad, and then the actions that they do blow up in their faces, as is always the case with Nazism, where do you think these guys go? Right? Like when the Ukrainian Nazis fled Ukraine, where do you think they went? Right? Do you think they got arrested and went to prison? Do you think they were like, oh God, these are Nazis, we need to arrest these guys and do something about it, right? No. They, as always, as is always the case, they end up going into Western society, right? Like Operation, what was it, Paperclip? Operation Paperclip. The Nazis literally became part of major American programs, and for God's sakes, like one of the head Nazis, I need to remember. This is a fact that I would like to get more specific about, because I'd like to be able to say this with a lot more confidence. But there is like one of the head Nazi people becomes like the chief director of NATO at one point. So it's like we're all pretending as though we're like a non-Nazi organization or a non-Nazi society when we're extremely pro-Nazi. Like we actually really love the Nazis, I think. Like I think that a part of that. One of the things I've said in the past is like our heroes used to just like blow up Nazis. We just used to shoot them. But that's part of the process of glorifying Nazism, right? That by treating Nazis as this like faceless horde, by treating Nazis as this evil demonic force, and not actually engaging with what it actually is, not actually discussing what it actually is, just putting a guy in an SS uniform and then shooting him because he's in an SS uniform, it elevates them to a type of deity, that it deifies Nazism in a way, because we're not because they become demonic, right? And a demon is just a fallen angel, right? That we in this society don't actually engage with what it means to actually be a Nazi. We don't actually engage. We don't actually have serious conversations in this society, right? Everything is this sort of banal Marvel garbage. Rose says, people have been doing that in the U.S. forever already, saying we need to vote Democratic to save our rights, and when we're currently losing rights under Democratic administration because they do nothing. Yeah. The elites have a chokehold over the liberals. And usually they'll say something about how the unelected Supreme Court is conservative because the conservatives won, so we need to vote blue no matter who. Yeah, it's infantile. Yeah, it is infantile. Like, but we're an infantile society. Like, we don't like to know things. Like, to me, the worship of ignorance, like, and it's not just being ignorant. It's the celebration of ignorance. It's that we're so ignorant that we're proud of it. Like, we're proud of how stupid we are. And if somebody shows up and says something that is true, they are ridiculed for it, right? Like, if you want to get mocked ruthlessly, if you want to experience the most ruthless mocking that you will experience in the society, just start talking about a subject you know things about, right? If you are an expert in a field, just go into a pub and start discussing it with people, and you will be ruthlessly mocked for it. Because most people are proud of their illiteracy, are proud of how stupid they are proud of how ignorant they are, and think that they are asking interesting hey, I'm just asking questions, when all they're doing is finding a way to insert their own bigotry into the conversation. It happens constantly. You have all of these people who, and you see it online all the time with this like QAnon group, right? That experts who have spent their entire life studying the issue will release a document, and then these people will just call bullshit on it for no reason other than it offends the pride of their ignorance. It's pretty wild. Austria, Hungary, and Russian Empire both push a hate ideology called Judeo-Bolshevism, which is a handy boogeyman. Yep. Germans spent billions of dollars building Stream 2, and when Biden said he will destroy it, Olaf Scholz just bowed down his head. Yeah. Europe has completely lost their sovereignty. Voting third party has never shifted the vote far enough to make Democrats win or lose. And in the U.S., Democrats push out third party runs because it threatens them. People wonder why it's two-party, yeah. Europe must finally go true commie with Chinese help. Germany needs to turn the clock back to 1918. Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. I think that Europe is facing some very dark period. I think that what's going to happen in Europe is a generalized rise of fascism. We'll see if we get like a Hitler-style figure again. We'll see if we get these sorts of repugnant figures. I suspect that we will. But you're already seeing that generalized rise of fascism, right? Like, what's happening in Italy? They literally elected a fascist leader who is pro-Mussolini. So this is just the beginning. You take a look at what's going on in the UK, where the leader isn't fascist, but he's a Goldman Sachs executive, so he might as well be, right? It's like the next best thing. Yeah, there's insufficient violence in Canadian society. No matter what crimes the elites pull, they do not suffer in any way. Yeah. Rose says, I find the situation in France incredibly interesting. Even a lot of right-wing people are supporting the protesters, not just lefties. I suspect that if it spreads, we could eventually see the realization of a socialist or similar society, without it being called socialist or communist. It could potentially arise as a sort of common sense, if that makes sense. The issue of what's going on in France is that it doesn't seem like you need a vanguard party. You need a group who is actually going to be seen as the why am I failing to articulate this? You need a group of people who are going to become the leaders of the place, who everybody understands are the leaders of the place. And it doesn't seem like that's going to come about. Unless France goes the straight up way of the commune. Like, that's completely possible. That'd be wild if everything became like a French commune sort of situation again. But I don't think the empire is going to tolerate that. What is really fascinating about what's going on in France is that the situation has become ungovernable. Like, the situation has become completely ungovernable. And I think the French, what I was talking pretty largely and yesterday about the arts and the power of the arts. Well, France has an extremely dense, long artistic tradition. Their cities are just art pieces into themselves. The Louvre is in France. They actually fund the arts in France. They actually fund the theater in France. They actually have an understanding that you need to actually, if you want to have an artistic tradition, you need to fund it and you need to maintain it. And so that exists. And so the French are more connected to what actually matters in life. They're more they have come to see that this neoliberal fascist system has no legitimacy, and rather than tolerate it the way that we are obviously tolerating it, they're just doing away with it. They're just getting rid of it, and they're getting rid of it the way that it has to be gotten rid of, right? Because you're never going to be able to vote this stuff away, right? You've got to tear it down brick by brick. And you take a look at what's going on in America. Like, even if your goal was to vote it away, well, the restacking the Supreme Court with people who are actually going to be sympathetic to humanity will take decades. Will take decades in order to achieve that goal. So if you wanted to have that done, it would be a long-term goal. You would need to see massive, major organizations getting into the electoral system now in order to do it. And it's not going to happen, of course, because the neoliberal fascists will not allow it to happen. You know, perjury is fine, fraud is fine, embezzling is fine. There will never be any elite person ever. Look, I don't know why we're lowballing like fraud and all this kind of stuff, like the perjury, fraud, embezzling, all that kind of stuff. Like literally, Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island named people like Donald Trump, former president of the United States, former President Bill Clinton, people like Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was the one that really got me, right? Tom Hanks was on that island. That the list of people who can I even find this? Is this something I can find? That they released this Epstein's Black Book list. Yeah, this is something you can find, right? And in it, you do have, like, I remember people, when this came out, people were going through it, and the names that they had found on it, it's like the death of American culture, right? That, yeah, here you go, Conrad Black, right? Conrad Black, boom, Conrad Black, well known, Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg is on this list. Like, the people who are on this list are pedophiles, rapists. They have created and have completely supported a pedophilic death cult that exists in order to kidnap children and rape them. Like, and this is real. This isn't like a Pizzagate scandal. This isn't like an underground sort of thing. This is out in the open, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And instead of this being front page news, instead of this being like a big purge, instead of this being a huge, enormous thing, like Oprah is on this list, for God's sakes. Like, Oprah is on this list, for fuck's sake. Like, we are living in a society that is tolerating a ruling class that has literally supported and propped up a pedophilic death cult. Like, I don't know what we need to see anymore. I don't know why this isn't on the tip of the tongue of literally every single media person and leftist, certainly. I don't know why this isn't on the tip of the tongue of every single person all the time. That the ruling class is a pedophilic death cult. That they kidnap children, groom children. Like this whole groomer thing that's coming out of the trans, like what are you talking about? Like even if you found one trans person who was operating in this way, there's literally a multi-billion-dollar an island where they kidnap children and groom them in order to rape them. Like what are you even talking about? And yet we're supposed to just tolerate this nonsense. The Duke of York. like we are talking about a society that has no credibility left. And why are these people not being brought in front of Congress? Why are these people not being brought in front? Like why are we talking to the guy from TikTok? Like why are we having a big like TikTok conversation? Howard Finkelstein, right? Instead of having like a huge conversation about these people. Like, why are these people just free to walk around in the society raping children the way that they do? Why are these people allowed to have any wealth? Why are these people allowed to have assets? Why are these people allowed to exist in the society safely? Like, just walking around, being normal people, normal people, but like, why are these people permitted to, and moreover, why do we not know who these people are? Like, why hasn't this been an enormous bloodletting? Like, why hasn't there been huge meetings? Why hasn't there been huge panels? Why are these people just walking around in the society? And it's because it's a death cult, and the capitalist death cult is, it wants to have a pedophilic community. It wants to have this. You can see that in the Catholic Church too, right? Yeah, there you go, the Koch brothers, David Koch, right? Like the wealthiest people and the most connected people and the people, the most famous people, Courtney Love, there you go, are these pedophilic rapists. So let's do away with this perjury, fraud, all this kind of low level garbage. Like, the most reprehensible shit that people can do to one another, these people do in a systematic way. Like, make no mistake, Jeffrey Epstein's been replaced. There's another Jeffrey Epstein already out there. There's another island already out there. They've already done it. It's already there. Don't fool yourself. This whole system has been replaced and has been put back into place because they want it. Rupert Murdoch, big surprise, right? Big surprise. That we are dealing with a psychopathic, narcissistic death cult that doesn't give a shit about building this. This is the society that they're building. This is the resources that they're spending. Like, when I talk about building structures, when I talk about building institutions, when I talk about building unifying projects, when I talk about these sorts of society building things that you should expect to see a ruling class want to do, well, this is it. This is what they're doing. This is the society that they are choosing to build, and they're doing it directly in front of your face and directly in front of your eyes, and you're simply not allowed to bring it up. And I understand why people don't want to talk about it, because it's deeply uncomfortable to know that the richest, most powerful people in the society are pedophilic rapists. Like, a movie like Cuties comes out so that these people can jerk off to it while they rape little girls. That's the Charlie Rose, right? Some of the most, like, wholesome names, people that you wouldn't, I mean, no surprise, there's the Rothschilds, of course. We all know that they're rapists and pedophiles. Jeffrey Sachs, right? Like, and I'm just glancing at this list. I'm not going down along, like, where's the purge? Where's the purge? Where's the big Congress panels? How come Hamilton South hasn't been ruthlessly questioned? Right? Kevin Spacey, of course. Like, how come Kevin Spacey hasn't sat in front of Congress and has been asked, so when did you go to Jeffrey Epstein's island? When did you first come into contact with Jeffrey Epstein? How many times did you go to Jeffrey Epstein's island? Like, and we know, like, we literally have a document from a woman who was on Jeffrey Epstein's island, where she's talking about being raped by Donald Trump. Like, we know this. These are the facts of the matter. And we just don't talk about it. It's just not discussed. They want to put it down the memory hole. They want us to forget about it. They want us to no longer discuss this, right? Blaine and Robert Trump, Ivana Trump, Ivanka Trump, Robert and Blaine Trump, right? The Trumps. Chris Tucker, right? Hey, my man, Chris Tucker. Like, this list is the death of American culture. It's the absolute bloodletting of there are people on this list. Mike Wallace. How come Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes hasn't been sat in front of Congress? So when did you first come in contact with Jeffrey Epstein? How many times did you go to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island? Did you ever come into sexual contact with anybody while on Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island? Like, how come this, for all, this is how you know the system is utterly fraudulent. This is how you know it's utterly fraudulent, unrepentant, unreformable, completely and totally fraudulent. Because we're talking about trans people grooming people while this list exists and nothing is being done about it whatsoever. Literally nothing is being done about it whatsoever. And that the actions of the CIA and the actions of the FBI exist to protect these people. Exists to protect these people and to ensure that they never face any consequence whatsoever for what it is that they have done. Right? And what is it that they have done? Well, let's be extremely clear what it is that they've done. They've erected an institution, right, so that they can kidnap children, bring them to an island, and use them as sex objects. And we just tolerate this. This is just how we are. And the rest of this is just like random shit. So let's be done with this idea that oh, well, they're willing to lie and bribe. Yeah, they're willing to kidnap kids. Like, they're willing to kidnap kids. Like, I don't know what you need. I don't know what you need at this point. Ugh. The Jeffrey Epstein stuff, man. Like, I get why people don't want to talk about it. I get why people aren't, like, it's so grotesque. I think it's grotesque. Yeah, CR Who, like, do you think Christy Turlington molested kids? Jeffrey Sachs, I don't. I think they were invited there on the premises of fundraising and then afraid to expose the actual pedos there. These people, like a guy like Jeffrey Sachs, okay, has people who organize meetings for him, right? Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted pedophile. Okay? Let's say this again. It's not like Jeffrey Epstein is, who's Jeffrey? I don't understand who Jeffrey Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted pedophile. He went to jail for pedophilia. He went to jail for it. He spent 2 years in prison for it. There is absolutely no one in the entire spectrum of reality who is going, oh, Jeffrey Epstein. If that is what happens, then all of their assistants, all of the people who are around them, specifically to protect them from people exactly like this, need to be utterly fired. Those are the people who need to sit in front of Congress. So why didn't you tell this? Why didn't you tell Jeffrey Sachs that Jeffrey Epstein was a well-known pedophile? Why didn't you tell him that? So this idea, they know who this guy is. They know what this place is. The idea that someone ends up on that island and is just bewildered about, oh my goodness, I can't even believe what I am seeing. Get real. Get real. Like, get completely real. I'm not interested. Like, I'm not interested. I don't know why you're acting as an apologist for this right now. Like, I don't know why you're acting as an apologist for this right now. Like, that's fun. Like, that's interesting. That we've got like an enormous scandal where Jeffrey Epstein's black book is loaded with people. We've got flight logs where these people's names are on the flight logs. We've got We've got a huge, enormous scandal, a literal pedophile cult, and you're going like, oh, I don't know. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And if you do have these sorts of questions, the questions that you should be asking are not these speculative, sort of odd little questions. You should be asking exclusively, why aren't these questions being asked by Congress? Why are these questions not being asked through an investigation? Why don't we have an enormous investigation where these questions are being asked? Like, you shouldn't be asking these questions to each other. We shouldn't be looking at each other and having debates about, well, couldn't it have been, and all of that. We shouldn't be asking these speculative questions to one another, acting as apologists for Jeffrey Epstein, right? The only question we should be asking is, why are these questions not being asked in Congress? Why is there not an enormous investigation? Why is this not? Why hasn't this already happened? And we know why. Because the entire system has lost its credibility. This entire system has utterly lost its credibility. And it cannot regain it. And it cannot regain it. Yep. I know why the Congress doesn't ask. These pedo rings work for them. That's exactly right. Like, that's exactly right. So we're not obliged to follow these people's laws anymore. Like, we're not obliged to do that. This is something that the people of France already found out and already figured out, that we're under no obligation to follow their laws. Their laws are fraudulent. They have no credibility. That we are only beholden to treat their laws for what they are, which are threats. That's all they are. They are the threats for the usage of violence exclusively. Exclusively. But you're under no moral or ethical obligation to follow them. No more than you would be morally or ethically obliged to follow the rules of a schoolyard bully who is trying to tell you that, oh, you got to give me your lunch money, right? Because I said so. Like, there's no obligation. Yeah, Tinker, I'm not surprised by that. France is split. There is a very dangerous far right that wants to use the protests as an excuse to take over. Yeah, which is exactly what happened in Ukraine, if you recall, right? Like, and the far right can take over. And in fact, actually, like, if you wanted me to bet money on it, I would put money on the table that the far right will take over, right? Like, the far right, we're in this really interesting moment where people want to delude themselves into believing that good speech beats bad speech, that we can talk our way out of it, right? The far right has understood from the outset and for forever that violence works, that you can get really far by just shooting people, and they're willing to do it, and it doesn't take that many of them. I think that's something that's very misunderstood. I think that's something that's extremely misunderstood in the conversation. Broccoli Cheddar Rice, good to see you. Your voice sounds amazing. It's because I'm actually finally, like, doing this. I need to get one of those arms is what I need. I just need to do it. I'm just being the thing that's not very well understood. Like, it didn't take that many Nazis to achieve their objectives in Ukraine, right? And they admit this. They say this out loud, because it doesn't take that many people. You just have to be willing to do it. You just have to be willing to go out and actually do the violence that's required to do. and then you can take it all over. And and of course it's a dead end, right? It's a dead end. You can't run a society this way. You can't organize along these lines, and the society that you erect is not one that's worth living in. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if the result of the French rebellion is a far right that takes over. It wouldn't surprise me for a moment. I heard the French military is pure Le Pen lovers. Yeah. But what is interesting about what's happening in France is how incapable the police and military seem to be. Right? That the real truth is that if your people become ungovernable, they are ungovernable. Like, you can't control them. Right? We'll see to what degree this comes. Like, are we going to see tanks in the streets? Are we going to see bombings? Are we going to see this sort of thing in France? We'll see the degree to which the ruling class is willing to go in order to inflict their terror on the populace. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and I think now's as good a time as any, I've been seeing around the internet the idea that there is going to be a false flag operation on a nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Here's an anonymous post, so take it for what it is. I am a lurker, and we'll get straight to the point. This is not a happening thread. This is 100% real. On July 4th or 5th, the United States will bomb the Zaporizhzhia power plant, located near the city of Enerhodar in southern Ukraine. I don't care anymore and will be 100% honest with you guys. I am a Marine Corps infantry veteran who is now working for the United States government in electronic espionage and have been for the last 5 years. The Ukrainian government and the United States government are working together in order to bomb the Zaporizhzhia plant and blame the nuclear meltdown on Russia, thus giving us immediate authority to use tactical nuclear warheads on Moscow, Novosibirsk, Kherson, and Omsk. This will trigger the Russians to throw everything they have back at the U.S. Thunderstorms are likely in Enerhodar, Ukraine on the 4th, so that is the only reason it may be pushed to the 5th. You have 72 hours maximum to prepare for nuclear war, and etc., etc. Zaporizhzhia. Thank you. Yeah. The false flag on ZNPP has been planned for months. It's the reason Ukraine blew the dam up, because that provides cooling. Like, this to me... No, there's been a lot of moments where it's been revealed that the ruling class is insane. Like, there's a lot of insanity that exists within the ruling class, I think. Just a lot of dementia, a lot of demented people, obviously suffering from, like, if it was just simply revealed that these people were literal demons, like they had just literally been taken over by, like, a demonic force, I would just be like, yeah. Like, I wouldn't be, like, surprised by that at all. I think I would be like, oh, yeah, okay, that explains a lot. Oh, okay, yeah, good. Makes sense. That creating a false flag event already is a pretty sinister thing to do. But to do it around a nuclear power plant is demonic and demented. And we've seen the United States do false flag events. We've seen lots of false flag events out of the United States, things that they've admitted to. But one around a nuclear power plant so that they can use tactical nuclear warheads. Like, false flag events are the norm for the CIA, yeah. Well, and what's The whole point of this false flag would be for NATO to trigger Article 5 and go into Ukraine. I mean, what we would be looking at then, because let's get real specific about this. Let's go Google Maps. Chop, 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 chop. Google Maps. Google Maps. Let's go Google Maps. How do you spell this? Zap. Yeah. Looks like I'm not the only one that's been looking this up. So here's where the nuclear power plant is. Right? So this is actually in territory that the Russians currently hold. Because the Russians currently hold territory all along here and essentially up this road. Because they recently just took Kharkiv, if I'm not mistaken. So all along here in this whole area, more or less. I'm sure that there's like going to be like a little pushback here or there, but this line right here is more or less where Russia controls. And the power plant, I just had it. Right in here. Right in here. So right across the water. Now, what this has meant, and one of the things I've always thought about with this, is how does this all resolve itself? How do we come to a point where this conflict is considered ended? Because right now the Russians have control of this territory. They're not going to give it up. This territory is Russian held. What is to be done with the remainder of Ukraine? Because the remainder of Ukraine is fractious, corrupt, just absurd, right? And I won't be too surprised. So a false flag event like this, my hope would be that their idea with this false flag event would give Poland, who they've been arming the shit out of Poland. This will give Poland the casus belli it requires in order to come into this territory, right? And perhaps bring troops up to the line here. But that the goal of NATO is to just come in and claim this territory for itself. Very, very dangerous, of course, because that creates a very clear, permanent battle line between NATO and Russia. My hope is that they are not planning on using tactical nuclear warheads and things like this, but that they are looking for a casus belli to come in and actually claim this territory. Because right now, technically, this territory is controlled by Ukraine and is independent. It's not NATO controlled. And I think NATO would like to control it. And so my instinct tells me that they want to create a false flag event, not so that they can strike at Russia and strike at this territory, but so that they can claim this territory for themselves. Yeah, USA would go to Odessa, Nikolaev, Kiev. Odessa? I think it's about securing Kiev. But this, of course, is just my sort of hope, right? This is just sort of my hope. So we are kind of in a wait-and-see sort of position. Like, who is to say what the ideas of the United States actually are in all of this? Yeah, they will push the dumb NATO nations like Poland and the Baltics. Yeah, every day just another liter of nightmare fuel. Yeah, it's a dystopia. If that's true, he'd be in jail, not in Belarus. M16 warned Ukraine it was a fake event to lure Ukraine to advance into a trap. Poland isn't going east of Dnieper. Maybe not Odessa either. The most obvious explanation is a correct one. The reason why they went to Belarus was because of Lukashenko, yeah. Oh, we're talking about, what's his name? Prigozhin, yeah. Yeah, the Prigozhin situation is an interesting one. Look, my opinion is it's basic mercenary shit. Like, it's basic mercenary shit. That mercenaries want to be paid for the work that they do, right? And I wouldn't be too surprised if Putin and his people were like, we're not going to pay you. We're not going to reward you for this, right? That Prigozhin likely went into this with high-minded promises and kind of came to realize like none of that was going to happen. And so did something of a suicide march and then was given a way out from Lukashenko in Belarus. And he took it. And I think it's just going to resolve itself. I can never remember this guy's name, and I don't know why. It just does not stay in my head. Prigozhin. I don't know why I can't remember this guy's name. I've been talking about this fucking thing for like weeks. Prigozhin. And he, I think he's just going to settle in Belarus. That's more or less what's going to happen with that guy. Well, because, like, if the United States is insane, right? The U.S. is insane enough to use tactical nukes. Is the only way to shatter Russia, right? Well, like, just nuke Moscow, right? And go on in. Look at all that territory you get, right? Look at everything you get, right? You just start using tactical nukes, right? All this land could be yours if you're the psychotic West, right? If you're this, like, death cult, just start nuking, right? But, of course, the threat of that is like, what, the Russians are not going to just let you do that, right? They're not just going to sit there and allow you to do that. So one has to think that, like, you guys know my position when it comes to the whole nuclear war thing, that I think it would require like a literal, like, open, not like a secret underground thing. Like, I literally think like the halls, like that Congress would need to be like, they would need to come and assemble in Congress, and they'd all be wearing like hooded cloaks. They would have like the atom symbol, the atom symbol. They'd have to have that all like etched and tattooed on their foreheads. They'd all need to have a nuclear bomb like in the Congress and be like going like, the nuke is God. Like, they would need to have that kind of, there would need to be like ceremonies where they're slaughtering goats in sacrifice before I came to believe that these people would actually commit to a nuclear war. Like, I just don't think it's going to be like, psychos. Like, these people are psychos, obviously, but even psychos are like, yeah, I don't want to die in a nuclear conflagration, right? Like, I'm not gonna turn this place into like a nuclear wasteland for what? For glory and honor or any of that kind of stuff. I really think it would require like a cult. It would be like like from Fallout. It would be like a nuclear death cult of like, our goal is to irradiate the world, bring on the green glow of God's glory. Like, it would have to be that kind of a thing. So my thinking is that a false flag event in Ukraine on that kind of scale would be used as the Cassius Belli for NATO to go into Ukraine in order to seize the territory that is considered neutral at this point. That's more or less what I think that their goal would be. Will it play out that way? Right? Will it actually play that way? Who's to say? Who's to say? Like, once war is unleashed, it becomes a monster of its own. It becomes its own beast. And it becomes something that you can't control. It goes where it wants to go. And the United States has shown again and again its stupidity and incompetence in regards to matters of war, and its inability to actually comprehend or understand how to actually meaningfully fight war. Like, for the last 100 years, the United States has essentially been a bully. That its idea of how to fight a war is to go into an unarmed nation that doesn't have a navy, that doesn't have an air force, that doesn't have missile systems, that doesn't have a serious military threat, and just roll tanks in and shock and awe them and blow them up. Well, that's not going to work against Russia and China and all these places. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to happen that way. But the United States hasn't really had to face a serious threat in so long that they get caught up in their own hubris and stupidity all the time, right? They don't know how to fight a war, because their idea of fighting a war is just drop bombs until they submit. But that doesn't even work. It didn't work in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, or North Korea. It didn't work. They blow up a lot of stuff, right? But they didn't win. Growing resistance to the war effort in Ukraine from the Western political right will take its toll in favor of Russia for the next few years if the war doesn't end. It does seem to be that's the case. It's wild to me that the anti-war movement is coming out of the right. Like, that's what's wild to me. And it seems to me that the only response that the left has had to this anti-war movement coming from the right is to mock the right. That's it. That's all they've done, which I find to be quite pathetic. That it's, instead of actually building a meaningful left coalition of anti-war voices on the left, and attempting to take action and attempting to do something to show that there is a meaningful resistance against the war from the left, all the left is willing to do is make fun of the right when they do it, which is not good enough. Not even close to good enough. Like, I consider that to, like, there's the reason why there is no left movement in our society. And it comes down to this moral purity, right? That leftists are extremely guilty of this. I've experienced this in my personal life very recently. That leftists are looking for an excuse to break ties with people. They're looking for excuses for why I am morally superior. That for many leftists, what they're doing is not about organization. It's not about changing the society. It's not about altering the society in some way. It's about maintaining their own personal moral purity. That's what it's about for a lot of leftists, for the vast majority, I would say. And so leftists are constantly looking for reasons to break ties, for reasons to create discord, for reasons to segregate or separate from each other. There's no because for many leftists, it's about just maintaining your own personal superiority and your own personal purity. And I see that in the anti-war conversation pretty starkly. Like, when the Rage Against the War Machine fight happened, well, the conversation coming from the left wasn't the justness of it. It wasn't, oh, isn't this interesting that there's an anti-war movement coming from the right. It was about the corruption of the right. That's all I ever saw. That's all I ever saw. I didn't see anybody being like, what they're doing is correct. It's good that the right is coming together and is actually forming an anti-war movement. I'm happy to see that there are people on the right who consider themselves pro-capitalist, who consider themselves libertarians. I'm happy to see that those people have enough sense to say that this war is senseless and we should come together and organize. right? I'm happy about that. I'm happy to see that there are people who want the war to end, even though I ideologically disagree with them on many other things. I'm happy that we do not disagree on the idea that this war should end. But instead of that, what did we get from the left? Bullshit is what we got. Just moral purity, high-roading bullshit, right? And I'm talking about organizations like the World Socialist website. I thought the World Socialist website lost a lot of credibility on that issue. Like the article that they published, I felt was childish and embarrassing, frankly. That instead of publishing an article that said, we may have ideological differences with the right, and here are those ideological differences even, but they are fundamentally correct in that we need to form an anti-war movement, and that we need to come together and say we need to be against this war. So instead of being mature and adult and saying that, yeah, we disagree, but we definitely agree on this, so let's go, right? What did they do? They just high-roaded and stood on their moral purity. And I'm sick of it. Like, I'm sick of it. As a commentator, if you're going to break ties with somebody because you disagree on an issue, or if all you're willing to do is stand there and talk about the things that separate you, instead of trying to actually fight against the system of power on issues that actually matter, then you're not a serious person. Like, you're in the conversation for yourself exclusively. And that's my position entirely. That we should be anti-war, right? We should be anti-war. We should be fighting against the spread of war. That while it's reasonable that people defend themselves from war and defend themselves and pick up arms when they are attacked, we should be calling it out for how it is. The left dismissed that rally because there was pro-Russian protesters. There's just this mental space that isn't allowed to be recognized that maybe a right-wing country like Russia is justified. Like, we aren't even allowed to entertain that idea. For all the talk about how NATO is bad, the left is furious that it's a right-wing country that is capable of defeating NATO and has a willingness to do it. Yeah, I mean, I think it really does just come down to, like, we good. That's all. I think it really is just people being like, we good. We it's the base tribalism, right? That Russia isn't us, and therefore Russia bad. NATO is us, therefore NATO good. And I don't think it goes much farther than that. That if you take a look at the actions of NATO, if you take a look who the members of NATO are, like, I point this out all the time, and I it's pretty stunning to me. Did you guys know that, like, a major neo-Nazi organization, sorry, not a neo-Nazi organization, a major Nazi organization came out of Germany, and that Germany was taken over by Nazis, and these Nazis were the antagonists in a world war that ended with a nuclear conflagration, right? Did you know that these Nazis are now part of NATO? You notice that? Isn't that interesting? That a country that is well known for its Nazism somehow managed to become part of this enormous quote-unquote defensive alliance. Isn't that interesting? Right? Isn't that interesting? Yeah, Jack Ma earned a nice life. He did not earn the power to set policy in China. See how that works? That's called having a government. Yep. Well, and hopefully as we move forward, there'll be less Jack Ma's in China. That the Jack Ma's of China will simply fade away, and that they'll be taxed out of existence, because a guy like Jack Ma should not exist. Just simply put, and we'll see if China is able to actually wrangle control of it. We'll see if China is able to actually enact that sort of vision. We'll see, but only time will tell on that one. What's going on in China is fascinating. These next 2 decades are actually going to be extremely telling about the future of China. Russia is an oligarchic, capitalist, corrupt nation. I understand that it's not Yeltsin's Russia, but call it out for what it is. Yeah. Like, Russia's an interesting place. Russia's an interesting place that, and again, I think these next 2 decades are going to be very, very interesting in Russia. Like, post-Putin is going to be an extremely, extremely, extremely interesting Russia. That I won't be too surprised if when the dust settles on all of this, unless it just continues escalating and there's like this whole fucking war goes on throughout Russia, which is possible. Like, we do have, like, you know, NATO, whose beating heart seems to be just this Nazi organization. Oh yeah, I've got it right here, bud. I'm definitely going to check that out. Just so it's not so flippant. How Nazism survived in Germany. Right? Speaking of Nazis, you should check out that Bez D. Marks video I was talking about yesterday, posted in the Discord. The West effing loves Nazis, and I generally think Nazis won the war. Well, I think it can be pretty clearly said that if the Nazis didn't win, communism lost. I think that that's true. That Russia won, but communism lost. And that the spirit of communism was definitely dampened because of World War II. And so from the capitalist position, World War II was a success, right? It weakened the communist spirit. It gave Russia the sense that it should get away from this communist idea, right? That capitalism was the ultimate victor of World War II. And as we all know, capitalists use Nazis as the ground troops, basically. Yet Germany's headed back in that direction a bit. AfD leading in the polls. Yep. Like, the rise of fascism throughout Europe it's coming, guys. Like, it's coming. Like, this, that we already have a fascist Italy. It could be the case that France could be taken over by a far-right fascist in the midst of all of this struggle. Poland is essentially fascist. Hungary is fascist. The United Kingdom, neoliberal fascism, essentially. Like, if Germany swings towards fascism, then you're looking at huge sections of Europe that are already, like, openly fascist, right? Or neoliberal, which, in my view, at this stage in the game is not much different. Test, says Seraphim, good to see you. Or the arrest of that leftist who was beating up Nazis. Yep, the government ruled in favor of the Nazis. Yep. Like, we're in this extremely bleak moment where obvious fascists and Nazis are taking over, obviously, and if you talk about it, you're the one that gets punished. Just U.S. puppets. Yeah, but the U.S. is itself fairly fascist. Like, and if the U.S. becomes, like, openly fascist, like, if Donald Trump runs again and gets into power and starts acting in the way that he says that he wants to act, like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that can happen from all of this. Labour's coming back to power in the UK. It's a far cry from Corbyn's Labour of a few years ago. Yeah, because they're concessionist liberals, right? Which at this stage in the game is just useless. Like, concessionist liberalism in the face of an overwhelming neoliberal fascism is pointless. Like, we are at a point now in the political discourse where we need we need to be purging our ranks of these neoliberal fascists. Like, we can't be tolerating it, but it's not going to happen. All the symbolism I saw at the 4th of July celebrations gave me Nazi vibes. When 5 men in black uniforms present the colors and flags, it's a real trip. Yeah, like I can't tolerate going to like fireworks shows. It's like, let's go celebrate the moment of our let's go celebrate our oppression. Basically, is what I feel like it is. World War II weakened communism in Europe. Yes, huge population loss, compromises with the church, management of East Europe, which is full of fascists. Well, and it didn't help that like a lot of those fascists were essentially rehabilitated, right? Like there wasn't like a big purge. It's not like they had like a big commission or something in order to rout out the fascists. There was the Nuremberg trial, but that got rid of what, 12 of them, right? And meanwhile, like major fascists become part of NATO, become part of NASA, become part of the United States government, right? And are rehabilitated. I think Trump's coming back in 2024. Biden's too senile and incompetent to stop the fascist tide. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably pretty accurate. And if it's not Trump, it'll be somebody else. It'll be like DeSantis, right? Like it's the Democrats have shown that they are like Biden is the perfect figure to be the leader of the Democratic Party right now, right? Just senile and incompetent, just absolutely incapable of actually doing anything meaningful for anyone. And the whole push him to the left narrative completely failed, didn't work at all. And it seems to me that it's not going to be that a bunch of people are going to rally to the side of the Republicans. I think it's just that the Democrats are not going to bother showing up, because why would they? They got nothing. Like Biden gave them nothing. Like that's how you know that what we're facing is like an emotional dementia, right? Is that the Democrats could have done something, right? They could have done something, but they didn't. They did absolutely nothing. Yeah. However, World War II weakened Chiang Kai-shek and his corrupt nationalists so much that Mao won in China. That's true, actually. That World War II was the reason why Mao was able to take over in China, because the Westerners were not able to actually organize. They were too busy dealing with their own internal shit. Oh yeah, I saw this. This is a good thing. Yeah. I used to not care about a second Trump presidency too much, but the statement about banning communists from coming here and doing something about the ones already in the States gave me a wake up. Yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty serious moment. Oh boy, 4th of July. Can't wait to celebrate a bourgeoisie revolution, the establishment of the bloodiest and most brutal empire in history. Yay, time to watch the SS March. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and what's wild to me is that people will watch like a Star Wars movie and be like, yeah, the empire is bad, and then be like pro-imperialist. It's crazy. RFK Jr., hopeless as well. Yeah. Like, at least RFK Jr. is articulating that something's gone wrong, you know? Like, Joe Biden is like, millennials complain about what's going on, and give me a break. Like, RFK Jr. is at least being like, no, like, something's gone wrong for sure. Did Trump actually say he would stop communists coming to the country? Yeah, I've seen that. I don't have... Here. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I bet you I'd be able to find it. Trump communist. I don't even know what to say here. Trump communists not allowed. I mean, he did a Muslim ban. Like, why are we surprised that he's going to do this same thing? Yeah, there you go. From ABC News. Right? Donald Trump has announced a new campaign proposal on United States immigration, barring communists and Marxists from entering the country. The Republican former president, who is making another bid in 2024 on Saturday, said that he would use Section 212F on the Immigration and Nationality Act in order to order my government to deny entry to all communists and all Marxists. The announcement was reminiscent of Trump's ban on travelers from several predominantly Muslim countries during his first term, which was heavily criticized as anti-Muslim and ultimately revoked by President Joe Biden. Those who come to enjoy our country must love our country, Trump said during a speech at the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference in Washington, adding, "We're going to keep foreign, Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America." So, that's great, right? That's certainly not a rising tide of fascism, right? Still, KMT would have kept power with a fascist U.S. POTUS and no distraction. In 1949, there was a huge distraction in Europe as Iron Curtain fell. Truman was no fascist. Truman was no fascist. Nuclear bomb. He just dropped nukes on 2 targets. That's fine. Also erected the CIA. Like Truman? Truman not a fascist. Oh, okay. Interesting. Bold claim. Source required. Like, I actually think that Truman was like the beginning of it all. Like, not really the beginning of it all, but just like Truman is the guy that puts the CIA into power. He's the guy who begins the CIA, literally drops nuclear bombs on Japan. Like, if he's not a fascist, then I'm sure he regretted it. Yeah, so like I'm sure Hitler had some regrets when he shot himself in that bunker. JFK assassination was the real fascist coup. I mean, truth be told, guys, like, the United States has always been like this. Like, trying to put this label of fascism on it, like, literally it starts by, like, committing a genocide throughout the territory of the United States and Africa. Like, oh, the A-bomb was not seen in 1945 as anything but another bomb. I mean, tell that to the Americans. Tell that to the Russians. Like, maybe the Japanese didn't see much of a difference. But, like, again, like, I just am like, I don't know why we're in this place where we want to create this dividing line. Like, the United States has always been like this. Like, it's always been this way, right? If it's not committing a genocide against the black population and the indigenous population, right? If it's not running tests on the mentally handicapped, if it's not suppressing workers, if it's not dropping bombs on workers, right? Like, it's always something. Like, it's always something. I think FDR was just in a situation, right, that, like, he looked outside the White House and there were communists, socialists, and labor unionists calling for revolution. You know, like, there really just does come a point where, like, your choices are very clear. You can either start gunning down your own citizens and start a civil war, or you can start conceding and doing concessions. And FDR was a concessionist, right? He gave concessions. That's all. Like, I don't think he wanted to. I don't think he was sitting there, like, going, yippee, hooray, I get to be the president who gets to concede power from the capitalist class. But I think the last 6 years have made it increasingly obvious that the American state is rooted in fascism. Tell me which policy was fascist beside turning away and you can't say turning away the Jews, and you can't say putting the Chinese and the Japanese into concentration camps, and you can't say nuking Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and you can't say so accept all the fascist things. Yeah, Midnight Rose, I mean, like, this is absolutely the truth. Like, one of the things that a lot of Westerners like to point out is that, well, yeah, sure, it was the Russians that fought the war, but it was American steel. You know, Americans gave them the steel, traded them the steel that they needed. Yeah. Yeah, but the Americans were also trading with the Nazis. Like, so just because the Americans are trading with everybody, like, you're trying to take credit for it. Like, it's unbelievable. Yeah, that was in the past. We're the good guys now, for reals. Like, the American, Henry Ford. Henry Ford was the reason why the Nazis had a war machine in the first place. Like, if it wasn't for Henry Ford, the Nazi war machine wouldn't have been able to run the way it did. Like, and it's the same with IBM and the concentration camps. That IBM computers were responsible for helping the Nazis organize the concentration camps. Like, the American corporate structure and the American power structure is deeply rooted in Nazism. Like, deeply, deeply rooted in it. Responsible for helping the Nazi war machine, without a doubt. Yeah, there were Ford factories and German production tanks. American bombers had orders not to bomb the factories because they were U.S. owned. Yeah. Was it FDR policy, or was it bankers and oligarchs who traded with the Nazis? Yeah, okay. Like, I don't know why you're trying to really, like, glad hand FDR. Like, at best it's FDR turning a blind eye, right? Like, stop blaming the Nazi-loving Ford. He was just an industrialist who accepted the Eagle Cross from the Nazi regime. Yeah, exactly. Right? What a great guy. Real great guy. You know? The Nazis just wanted to say thanks. They just wanted to be like, hey, we really like this guy. That's all right. And Ford was just like, oh, somebody really likes me. Right? So what's the problem? Like, what's the problem? Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. What a ridiculous thing this is. What a ridiculous place we live in. What a ridiculous set of circumstances. Here's a great one, guys. Here's a great one. Some U.S. cities are allowing corporations to vote in local elections in the hope of stimulating the economy. Like, are we a fascist country? Allowing corporations to vote in local elections? Like, it's become comical. It's just become like a parody of itself. That soon we're just, yep, corporations voting, the definition of fascism. Methane, good to see you, bud. That's so absurd, I don't even know where to start. Like, soon it'll just be like, just let the corporation do what it wants, right? Soon it'll just be corporations voting. Yeah, it just gets worse each day. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Henry Ford was a true industrialist like Elmo Musk. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh. You know, guys, I really hate to do this, but I'm actually feeling a little sick again. I'm actually, like, sweating and overheated. I think I gotta call it. Oh, my goodness. I'll be back on tomorrow. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay a good little commodity like you're supposed to. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.